Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Was that convincing?
I don't know.
Maybe it doesn't need to be. Well, the year is almost over. How are you feeling about 2024? If you had to have one word to describe 2024, what would it be?
Shit show.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm. For so many reasons.
Mine would be like anxiety was the word of the year for me, I feel like. Yeah. Until November. And then it turned into shit show with anxiety. Because for most of the year for me, it was like this feeling of collectively, I felt like we were all collectively kind of holding our breath. And there was all this tension. Ooh, maybe tension's the word. It just felt like all this tension and anxiety about what will happen. Sadly, then we got the answer to what will happen. And it was a shit show.
Yeah. 2024 came to kick ass and take names. Let me tell you, outside of like the collective anxiety and tension and grief that a lot of people are dealing with and have been dealing with all year, like I keep seeing like RIPs of just like older Black celebrities, artists, popping up on my Instagram newsfeed, and every time it's like, oh my God, another one. Like, what the hell is happening? I
think there's a lot of people who are like, you know what? I've had a good life. I can't deal with what's to come.
Take me.
Right? If I were much older, I might be feeling the same. I feel like I'm just a little too young for that, but I feel that in my bones of like, I got a glimpse of what's to come. And
Yeah,
it's rough. Yeah. It's been a rough year.
It has been rough.
To some degree, I feel like we've been saying that at least since 2020. Which it feels like every year has just been like, oh, you thought you were bad 2020, here's 2021. Oh, I'll show you up 2022. And then like this year, and God only knows what 25 will bring. But.
Well, and I was talking about this with my acupuncturist yesterday. And my wife and I have been talking about it for a few weeks, because if you're into astrology, Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. And it is transitioning out of Capricorn, or by the time you listen to this, it has already transitioned out of Capricorn. It's transitioning out on November 19th into Aquarius. So we're about to enter the age of Aquarius. And I have a Capricorn stellium.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, if it's anything like hair, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, does that mean we're all going to be hippies, or what does it mean?
So Aquarius is really, really rooted in collective transformation and like dismantling systems. So it's a time of intense disruption and imagination and creativity, and just kind of rethinking things from a systems level. So collectively, that's what we're about to engage into. And if you are an Aquarius or are an air sign, if you are an air sign, then this is also not an air sign. Pluto in Capricorn affects the cardinal signs. Pluto in Aquarius affects the mutable signs. So if you have a mutable sign in your top three, then on an individual level, thinking about your internal systems, right? Your relationships and how you process information, how you see the world. So I have a Capricorn stellium, which means I have 4 planets, or 3 planets in my Black Moon Lilith, which is new to me, but the Chani app added that in a couple months ago. And so yeah, in all 4 of those things in Capricorn, which is a lot. It's a lot of Capricorn energy. So I am ready for the planet of the underground and shadow work to leave my fucking space. I'm so ready.
And for those of us who are not as astrology astute, which is myself, like I know a little bit, but not a lot. I think we can all just agree, whatever the reasons, whatever the signs may be saying, 2024 year has been rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to not make it all about how horrible things have been, it's taught us lessons. And for that, we can be grateful because I try, and with my son, teaching him resilience, which is a big focus for us right now, I keep trying to focus on, hey, things can be bad, but nothing's ever a failure if we learn from it. Nothing is ever like the worst if we can learn from it, right? There's growth to happen, and then that's some good things. Let's try to find the good. Not that I am like, trying to positive
thinking your way out of this,
out of everything, and love and light him out of everything, just to be clear.
Good vibes only.
Right. But we are learning about resilience and how to deal with hard times and deal with failure or perceived failure. And part of that, I think, is what do we learn from it? How can we grow from it? Because that's what matters. And guess what? 2025 may also be a shit show. I'm going to say, I would probably, if I were a betting woman, put my money on odds on favorite. 2025 is going to be a shit show. Like it may give 2024 a good run for its money. So how do we grow and make it better at an individual level? Because obviously systemically, there's all kinds of stuff happening and there are things that we can try to do. We've talked about a lot of that in other episodes, but like right now, it's like, what did we individually learn from it? And how are we individually going to apply that in our lives moving forward? So what's a lesson that you learned in 2024, Taina?
I feel like I knew this, but I learned it in a new way this year. And that is that community really is everything. Like it really, really is. And I think we can say that and believe it, right? It's not like you say it and you don't believe it, but I almost died this year. Like I was hospitalized for over a month. I went in at the end of February or mid-February for a routine type of surgery, and they fucked it up, and I ended up in the ICU. I ended up in sepsis, and they had to do another emergency surgery, and it was one of the hardest experiences of my life. And we were living in Baltimore, where we have had one friend and another person who I would also consider a friend, but we don't connect with that person often. We had one friend that we were connecting with on a consistent basis. And so our entire community is in Atlanta. Like the community that we have spent the past 10, 15, 20 years building is in Atlanta. And the way that and in some other places as well, like there's a few people like in Texas and some other states that are an essential part of our community. But the way that they, without being physically here, were there for us, like helping my wife manage everything, because we were also in the middle of moving / buying a house. And that process took longer than anticipated. So my wife was basically homeless for like 4 weeks, living in a hotel with her 2 dogs. The hotel room, just like most of our stuff was in storage, but then there were some things that were there in the hotel room with her. And so the poor dogs just like cooped up in this small space, my wife having to take care of the dogs, do her job, like go to work, come check on me. Like we had one friend who flew up and stayed with the dogs for a week. So my wife could spend the night with me in the hospital and advocate for me, because outside of most of the nurses, one of the nurses is the reason I ended up in sepsis, or one of the reasons I ended up in sepsis, and had to whatever. Anyway, but the medical team was just bullshit. Like it was just like they were just not helpful, and having someone there to advocate for me was like really important. I had a friend who drove from Ohio with her boyfriend and came for a couple of days to help my wife pack up and move, and stayed with me in the ICU to just like advocate for me there. We had friends, or two friends here in Baltimore, who came and one of them came and just sat with me for a few afternoons to just keep me company. And at one point, people kept asking me what I wanted, and I was like, I just want some watermelon. And like, I just had this craving for watermelon because hospital food is shit. And she brought me watermelon. And then another friend who picked up medicine for us. Like, and so friends who were sending us money to pay for the hotel room, who, like, we would not have made it through that time without our community. And there are previous experiences from other times in my life where I relied on community and community really pulled me through. But this is by far like the most in-depth way that community really, really held us through a really tough time. And so that's my lesson for this year, is that I will die without community. Like,
quite literally, right?
Quite literally. Yeah, quite literally. Like, I could not have survived without my community. And so if I was going hard for community before, I am going harder for community now. And that's something that it's really humbling, because you have people doing things for you that you can never repay. And that really, can you hear my wife yelling at the dog?
Yeah.
Foxy's probably eating Luna's food.
Was it Foxy?
Yeah.
She said? Because it sounded like fuck me. So I'm glad it was Foxy.
No, she said Foxy. She was like, Foxy, stop it. Because Foxy likes to
I thought she was mad
Luna's
at the
food.
computer or something, because I thought I heard me. I'm like, oh no.
No, she's yelling at the dog. Foxy's also the one that has a little bit of like onset doggy dementia happening. So
hard to be too upset that she's eating at a dog's food.
Yeah.
Well, community was on my list as well. Not to the degree that you experienced that, but I mean, I think it's beautiful that you had that experience, not that you had to go through that, but for that reminder that community does matter and shows up in the hard times. But even for me, who didn't have anything like that, I was thinking in my lessons, probably as usual, more along the lines of business. And for me, community and business has been just so important in this year. Like, I have gotten to the place where it's like, I just don't want to do anything on my own. I want to only experience, even though my work is my work, like when I'm with clients, I feel like I'm in community, right?
Yeah.
So my work delivery doesn't feel solo, but then the work of running a business, marketing a business, all of that feels so solitary and isolating. And community has been so important. I've done some collaborations this year. We started this podcast this year. I've had a lot of things happen for me in this year that have been about, how do I approach business in a way that isn't, even though I'm a solopreneur, you know, in theory, how do I do business in a way that allows me to have a collective experience of it?
Yeah.
And that the more that I do that, the better I feel about business. And it's just, and people show up for you and they help, and it feels so much less isolating. And so that's when I wrote down community, that I was thinking of it in that business sense, but also those business friends become real friends, you know, not that business friends aren't real friends, but become friends in a more holistic kind of way.
Yeah.
And that's been really great for me. So I share that one with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one that I have down, and I'll be curious to see if it's similar to anything you had, but a lesson I learned this year too, because 2024 started really rough in my business financially, and then went on for months and months and months of being really rough. It got scary for me financially of like, can I do this? And as I mentioned before, I've been in business on my own. Like, I haven't been traditionally employed since 2004. I started my business January 5th, 2005. So I have been self-employed for a long time. I really consider myself unemployable, both because my resume would be unemployable, because I've been out of the workforce so long. My skills don't necessarily readily transfer into traditional business job listings, right? And also my personality is unemployable. I don't work well with others. Like I just would not be, I'm not a good employee. And I know that about myself. And so I got scared this year of like, what am I going to, like, am I going to be able to weather this storm in my business? Again, going back to that collective holding of the breath, I felt in the business world, there was this collective holding of the breath and of the purse strings of like, I don't know what's coming. So I don't feel ready to spend. And it wasn't until like August, September that things started to turn around for my business. And I had these glimmers of hope again. But the lesson I learned, unlike in the past, because I've been in business for 20 years, I have seen ups and downs, right? I weathered the 2008, the Great Recession. Like I know what it looks like to have hard times in business and to survive them and to panic. And in the past, I have panicked, right? I have felt those feelings of fear and I have immediately LinkedIn, Indeed, searching for jobs, sending out resumes, like going into full panic mode, even though I know none of that's what I want. And what I have learned, and this year really helped me solidify and prove, is that we have to have belief, faith, hope, whatever you want to call it, manifestation. I know you're into manifesting, whatever the thing is for you that resonates, whatever word or sense brings that in. But this, like, not resorting to panic and fear and letting the fear win and falling down those rabbit holes, but instead, I don't want to say staying the course, because still I made changes, I adjusted, but always with this profound sense of, I will weather the storm. This will be okay. I will find my way out. Yes, it's scary, but I'm not going to let the fear win. I'm not going to let it get the best of me. I'm not going to go into panic mode. I'm going to figure it out. All right. I'm going to stay proactive instead of reactive. And that works. And it always works, but I'm rarely able to be there from the start. Yeah. And this was one of the first years that I finally, and maybe because of community, speaking of community and having that support around me, I was able to stay in that mindset and get through the storm and feel really good now coming out the other side of like, I didn't use all that time to panic and let fear win. And it feels really good. So that's a lesson I definitely want to hold on to. Yeah. In seeing it in action and saying, that's right. That's right. Yeah. You know, I can do hard things.
Yeah. I like that because it is a lesson that I feel I'm currently learning. Like I have a lot of earth in my chart, so I'm a pretty like steady, grounded person. I do have my moments of panic, right? And so I feel like I dip my toes into panic every so often. And it kind of, when I dip my toes into panic, it's usually like an anxiety. It's usually has built up, right? Whereas I feel like I'm totally about to put my wife on blast here. Like
she already was with the Foxy, fuck you.
But like for someone like my wife who has like chronic anxiety, right? Like
me too.
It's really easy to just be anxious all the time about everything. Whereas for me, I'm just like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Oh, fuck. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And it'll be fine. Right. And so, so the lesson that I'm currently learning about like what that means and like learning to put language around that is being able to create psychological safety for myself, no matter what the circumstances. And this is something that has, that is a part of like my manifesting workshop, where it's like, you cannot manifest if you don't feel psychologically safe. And things that corrupt or disrupt our psychological safety are things like guilt, shame, regret, anxiety, a lot of things that are rooted in like either traumas or just living in a capitalist hellscape, right? So being able to like frame it that way for me has been really monumental in terms of like understanding, okay, this is what the process looks like. Like, it's not like this abstract thing that sometimes happens to me and I have no control over, but it is something that I have absolute control over, like how to create that psychological safety within myself despite external circumstances. And so I think that belief is about trusting yourself.
That's exactly it. Speaking of dipping your toes, I'm full of water signs. And so I feel like there's no dipping the toes. I am fully swimming in the anxiety all the time. Maybe that's where that comes from. But yeah, so it's not, I guess to be clear, like, it's not that because I have a lot of issues around manifesting culture.
Yeah.
Mostly,
for sure.
Right.
For
mostly
sure.
that it's white women who look like me who are talking about how they manifested it. And I love Rachel Cargill's expression. Did you manifest it or was it white privilege?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to be clear, I'm not talking about like, oh, I just was like totally believed that I would be making lots of money and then the money showed up. Like it's none of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was the difference is being able to be in the belief that I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. This like you said, belief in self. And that is what I have cultivated that I didn't always have, where when things would get hard, I would go into this panic mode because I think the voice was, you can't solve this. You can't figure this out. You're not good enough. All of that kind of voice that would then send me into this like, yeah, you're probably right. So I better go get a 9 to 5 or whatever. And now it's like there is the deeper voice that I have cultivated over years and hard work. And finally got to a place where it was able to show up from the start and say, yeah, this is hard and it is scary. But you have two choices here. You can let fear win, or you can believe in yourself that you have the tools, the experience, the abilities to survive this, to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And so it wasn't like I was manifesting. Because if I were manifesting all kinds of money, I would be doing a whole lot better right now. So it's not that.
Yeah.
But it's like I was cultivating inside of myself the wherewithal and the belief that I can survive hard things. And that is a change for me.
Yeah. And then that helps you take better action.
Exactly. Because that's exactly it. When we are taking action from a place of desperation, those actions are rarely the actions that we would be taking. Because they're the very, very, like, I'm never looking for a job when I'm doing great in my business, making money, right? Because I know that's not really fundamentally who I am and how I want to show up. Yeah. So the fact that I'm doing that in those moments of desperation is a clear sign that I am living outside of my values, outside of alignment with what I know to be true for myself. And that's what happens when we're in that place. So anyway, thank you for sharing that because that was that was great.
Yeah.
What else for you?
I learned this is more of like a tactical, tangible thing, but, so I lived in Atlanta for 20 years and the South often gets a bad rap in terms of like the racism and the homophobia and like the Christian nationalism and things like that, which that does exist, but the South also has a very rich history of organizing and mobilizing communities that are impacted by harmful policies and by the politicization of our bodies. And I thought that Atlanta/Georgia was bad in terms of how little sometimes it feels like the state government or the city government cares about its citizens. But I had not seen anything until I moved to Baltimore. And which is interesting because Georgia is what we would call a red state and Maryland is a blue state, right?
Although Georgia's moving towards a purple state.
Yeah, it's moving towards it's moving towards being a swing state and hopefully eventually being
but historically,
a blue state.
Or at least in the modern era of republicanism.
Yes. Yeah.
Since the Newt Gingrich days, anyway.
Yes.
It's been a red state.
So, we moved up here. My wife and I had never lived in Maryland before. I had never been to Baltimore before. She'd been to Baltimore a few times. But we knew it was like the Northeast. Like, I think we had this naive idea that like, it's almost not total promised land, but like it's a blue state. Politics are going to be better. People are going to be better. And it has been almost a complete opposite. I will say Baltimore is one of the blackest cities I've ever lived in. And I love that. But it's so evident in how neglected the city is in terms of funding and policies. Like, it is a fucking wild, wild west out here. Like, it's surreal how it's just a surreal place. It's such a surreal place, like in terms of housing, crime, which we know crime is a symptom of people not getting their needs met, right? Traffic, infrastructure, like so many things that just, it's really weird. And then there are these pockets inside of Baltimore City where like the white people live, the wealthy people live, that are so far out of touch. It's like there's just such a big disconnect between like the urban part of the city. So like the house that we purchase I would consider it like the more urban part of the city. It's mostly Black and Latinos, immigrants, working class people. And the house that we bought was listed for $225,000. Also, we probably could not afford to buy a house anywhere other than Baltimore, to be quite honest. But, and we paid just under that for this house. Within the same city, there are multi-million-dollar homes. And then you have row homes that are going for like $110,000, $115,000, $150,000. And so the disparity is just so obvious on such a level that I have never seen anywhere before. And I was born and lived in New York till I was 10. I lived in the middle of nowhere in Florida, middle school and high school and part of college. Very small town, one stoplight. I lived in Atlanta for over 20 years. I lived in LA for 3 years. My wife lived in LA for most of her life. So she also spent some time in the San Francisco Bay Area, while she was going to college. She also lived just outside of Boston while she was an undergrad for a little bit. So like, we haven't lived everywhere in the United States, but we've lived in some of the major cities in this country. And we have not witnessed the type of disparity that we have witnessed here. And the lesson in that is that government is not here for people. Like, we have a Black mayor, and I don't know too much about his work and his values and his policies. I do believe that he is probably the best option for Baltimore City, since it's a majority Black city. We just elected Angela Alsobrooks, a Black woman senator. So that was a win in this past election. But representational politics in general, government in general, like, they really don't give a shit about people.
Well, I would also say, and maybe it's only because I think Brandon Scott's so good looking. He is fine. Your mayor. But I would also say there's only so much that
they can do. Yeah.
Because of the systemic issues that tie their hands. I mean, when you look at how schools are funded, first and foremost, anyone who has never read Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozol, it's a very old book. I haven't reread it in a long time, so I don't know how well it holds up. But my recollection of it was that it is very illuminating, and at least understanding the reasons behind. I think so much of this starts at that very fundamental piece of education. Of course, now we're going to get rid of the Department of Education, so who knows? But fundamentally, when we fund our schools based on property taxes, it's the easiest way for the rich to get richer and the poor to stay poor, right? Because education is such a fundamental piece of advancement. And if your education depends on how much money your parents have, well, that's a real problem. It's a real great way to keep the cycle continuing. So, but I also hear you. I think there are these bigger, deeper fundamental issues, systemic kind of issues, and then that just keeps trickling down. But then I think ultimately, because local politicians their hands are tied to do anything, those who actually want to do something leave rather quickly because they become disillusioned, and then it ends up attracting the folks who are really just there to line their own pockets.
For notoriety, and for gain,
whatever
for
it is, whether
gain.
it's right. But it's one reason we see so many politicians being so corrupt. And so I fully feel that.
Yeah. One of, so I have a couple authors that I know, one of whom is a close friend, and one of whom is a close friend of that close friend. And she was here for a school visit early on, like I think maybe 6 or 7 months after we had moved. And So we met up for drinks and she was like, how is it? How do you like it? And I was like, oh my God, we hate it. And at the time we were just like, okay, let's give it at least a year and a half to just like really make up our minds. And it's been a little over a year and a half now. And we've made up our mind. This is not the place for us. Like we would rather be in a red state with our community than in a blue state without our community. And so that's the path that we're on. But her boyfriend was from this area and went to school at Howard. And she said that he had told her that show The Wire, which we should have watched before we moved, but we didn't, that usually on TV shows about cities, like they usually exaggerate things. And that's the only show that he has ever watched that has not exaggerated how bad like the systemic issues are. As someone who's
watched The Wire, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I feel like I can say in some ways I relate because St. Louis is so deeply segregated that and people who aren't from here have a hard time understanding that. Although I have a feeling our urban issues aren't as exaggerated as what's going on in Baltimore. I think maybe metropolitan wise, like St. Louis might give you a run for the money on the segregation issue. But I think like St. Ous proper, like the urban city, we don't have the degree of issues that Baltimore does. So okay, I'm going to share one that after that sounds really silly. But speaking of just sort of simple practical lessons I learned this year, and it's somewhat related. I actually think now that I'm thinking about it, it's very related because you're saying where you are matters a lot to how you show up.
Yeah. And
for me, I'm taking this at a much more macro level, but I redid my office this year. Your wallpaper's not done yet, but it's coming.
It's not. I was like, last weekend, I was like, I'm going to do it this weekend. And it just did not happen.
All right. Yeah. But I did get my room done. I painted the walls a really deep blue, which scares me and my mom scared me as she was talking about it. But I was like, I want it to feel different in here. It was really light gray. It was like the kind of gray you put on a wall when you want to sell your house.
Yeah,
nobody
that
wants
millennial gray.
Right? Like,
yeah,
we don't want to
hate that fucking color.
I don't want to offend anyone. I took out a closet in this bedroom, which is like a major no-no. How dare you remove a closet to create this reading nook that I absolutely love. It's wallpapered with something similar to yours, very, vibrant colors, and it's floral. I put in a wonderful chair with a lamp so I can sit and read. The room I put up all this artwork that I love. Like the room feels so different now with really not huge changes. And what it really taught me is my environment makes a big difference in how I feel and how I show up. Keeping this office clean, which I have been really working to do lately. My desk is usually trash. This whole room becomes like a dropping point for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I've been stopping that. And just having one space in this house that's mine, because I have a family, when I can get away. I love my kid, but I like having this room that's just mine. It's not my partner's. It's not my child's. This is my room. I get to have it the way I want. It feels like me, right? Like Becky, not like wife, not like mom, but like Becky.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference in how I show up and get things done. And so it's a real reminder to me that the environment we're in really does make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like when we painted this room, the entire house was gray. And it reminded me of my time in the hospital. So like that neutral shade in hospitals, that it's like supposed to be like calming, and it just feels sterile and unalive. And I also whenever we were going to open houses, like even before I was hospitalized, I was like, oh God, gray. The floors are gray. The walls are gray. The trim is gray. Like the doors are gray. Like it's just too much. Like I need something with like character. I need something that feels vibrant. And that doesn't necessarily mean bright, bold colors. Like I'm more of like a moody, deeper, richer tones. And so we painted, what was the name of the color? Bitter sage was the name of the green that we painted this office. And that day was one of the best days that I had in a really long time, because immediately it just changed the mood in here. And then like I ordered switch plate covers that aren't white, that look a little bit more vintage, and are like this like antique brass looking color. And so I replaced those. Originally, we were also going to paint the trim, but then once I started dealing with the trim, I realized that it seems like a lot of the trim in this room is really, really old and wasn't taken care of because it's really dry and it's just starting to just like almost like dust. So the trim just needs to be replaced. So that's a different project. And then the wallpaper, which we will finish soon, knock on wood. And got a new desk. Cause the desk that I have that I'm on right now, it's the IKEA PAL desk, which is for kids. So it's very small, and just way too modern for my taste. So got something that has a bigger working space, and feels a little bit more. The desk is gray, unfortunately, but it was at a price point that I felt comfortable.
Well, there's nothing wrong with gray inherently. But did you have any more lessons? Because I have one more if you don't.
I think this goes back to the community piece. Just like allowing myself to just like really be vulnerable. Like that's always been really hard for me. As someone with 4 Capricorn placements, who's also an introvert, I'm just a very independent person, and I've been on a journey of learning how to be interdependent. But the vulnerability part of that is still difficult for me sometimes. And so I had, when I was hospitalized, I had forced vulnerability. And so that felt like you feel really powerless, in that moment. And so one thing that I've been grappling with and in the process of learning since then is like, okay, how do I take my power back, but maintain that level of vulnerability? And so a lot of that has looked like, honestly, getting back in touch with my body. Like, I'm in my head so often that like my somatic presence is not something that I was supposed to say, it's not something that I think about a lot, right? Even that statement in and of itself is like, it's telling you where I'm at. So, so I recently signed up for, have you heard of the Embody Lab?
Mm-mm.
I don't think it's like a physical place. I think it's a collection, like a collective of somatic practitioners and psychologists and psychotherapists. And so they have this certificate program. It's called Somatic CBT. It's a somatic CBT training. And so I enrolled in that for myself and also to be able to eventually like support my clients in that process. And so that has been really, really helpful for me. And so that I'm learning to just kind of get in touch with my soma, is as they would call it, as the professionals would call it. So that's the lesson for me.
I love that. Erica Corday, who's also in Baltimore, talks about interdependence versus independence. So maybe we'll link to her in the show notes. People can go learn more from her because that's something I've also been really trying to work towards, like with that collaborative, collective spirit, but continuing to think about how does that show up? Because I've obviously been conditioned to be hyper independent as well. We all have. Well, then my last one is follow the joy. This year I learned more and have allowed myself more to follow the joy. I haven't always been that way. I've always, in the past, it's been like, I have been so also in my head and so serious, and like everything has felt like it has to be in service of something, right? There's no just amount of like, do I just enjoy this? Do I just want to do it because I want to? It's always it. And the thing that it's showing up for me is sort of my entry point into this, because I want next year to do more of it, but has been reading. I have for so long now. I used to love to read fiction, loved it. And I stopped when I started a business. So for like the last 20 years, pretty much, give or take a little, I have been reading nonfiction, either business, marketing, those sorts of books, or things around like anti-racism and personal development and, all of that side of things. But it has been very, very much like why am I reading if it's not in service of building my business or improving my life or learning how to be a better person or a better ally or what all these things are. And that in this world these days, that gets really heavy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh God, there's so much already going on in the world. And then I'm going to make my reading all heavy also. And I forgot like what a joy it is to just read fiction. And so I, this year was like, I'm going to allow myself to like read fiction, even like rom-com romance kind of stuff, which I've never done. And it's been a delight. And I am burning through books now. Now I listen, just to be fair, but listening's reading.
It is.
Yeah. And I am up to like, I don't know. How many books have I read? Because I've been keeping track of them for this year. Like, so when I was like, still not in that thing, I read like 4 books in the first 6 months of the year. And now in the rest of the year, I think I've read about 20 something.
Wow.
20 books in the last, like, I don't know, since June. So
that's a lot.
For me, it's a lot. I know there are people who read like a book a day or whatever. Those people are amazing, but not me.
Who has that fucking time?
I don't understand those people either. But so, and it's just been fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to remember, where else am I not allowing myself to pursue something that would just bring me joy? Because I think it has to be
productive.
Right. Productive. More important than that. So that's one I want to carry in for sure to next year, because I'm just at the beginning. Like I said, I just started allowing myself to like enjoy books in the last few months. And so I want to keep pushing beyond that too and explore that in bigger ways in 2025.
Yeah. I like that. It's hard for me to get into fiction these days just because for so long I was and have been just focusing on nonfiction, either grad school or business or marketing or whatever. I actually have a Bookstagram that I never keep up with. But it's on there. It's Taina Reads at Taina Reads. So if you ever want to check in and see what I'm reading, or maybe what I read 6 months ago, because I haven't updated it in forever.
Nice.
Okay. So on that note, what are some other intentions that you're taking into 2025 with you? So doing things just for the joy of it.
That's a big one. We talked about this before in another episode, but I want to continue really being intentional about what I consume. And I don't mean food. I'm talking about like information consumption. So I want to just continuing to explore attention economy issues and where am I giving my attention and why? Like what's happening systemically that's making me give my attention certain places so that I can begin to like really look at my attention as valuable a resource as I look at my money. I think all the time about where I'm spending my money and why.
Yeah.
But my attention, I just give away freely. Like I'm a whore with my attention, and I want to really become more intentional about that. So that's something I'm really wanting to focus on next year too, is to get even more serious about that, because I think, I hate when people say now more than ever, but now more than ever, I am really going to need to be mindful of that, because I could easily see myself slipping into quite a depression in the year ahead if I'm not careful, based solely on just what I'm allowing to consume my attention.
Yeah. It's an act of self-care, I think, given the current climate that we're in.
Right.
If you want to hear more about Becky's journey on figuring out what to give her attention to and embracing digital minimalism, we have a previous episode on that. So check that out. I think I alluded to this earlier, just about really going harder for just like community and collectivism. And I was on a call, not a call, but, and it wasn't a webinar either. It was a meeting of the minds. I don't know what else to call it, but it was hosted by 5 other business owners, small business owners who are also for like collective liberation and community. And it was called Business Not As Fucking Usual a few weeks ago. And one of the hosts on the call said, like, one of the ways that we can resist like this toxic individualism and toxic capitalist ideals as we're building our businesses is to understand that we're building communities, not audiences. And so that has really, really resonated with me since then. And so I have been in the process, my intention of grafting or drafting this intention and then taking action towards it, which I think will follow me into 2025 and beyond. I think, honestly, it'll be something that I will continuously do as I'm working on my business, really auditing my business, like everything from like pricing to what I put in my emails to what my website looks like to how I market my offers, to make sure that it is rooted in community and collective principles and not in any kind of like extractive capitalist ideologies. And so that has looked like rethinking my pricing structure, rethinking when I want to show up and when I don't, almost not everything will change, but how I do everything will change, if that makes sense. And then on the individual level, I said my wife and I are on the path of we'd rather live in a red state with community than in a blue state without our community. And so at some point in the next year or two, however long it takes, we will find our way back to Atlanta. And that's the intention for next year, to move in that direction. However long it takes us to physically get there is a different question. Like we don't know how long that will take, but that's the direction that we're moving in. And our plan is, and we talk about it any chance we get to talk about what that move will look like, is to be able to buy like property, land, where we have a lot of friends who are single by choice and who don't have kids by choice. And so one of the most heartbreaking things when I was hospitalized was like seeing the elderly hospitalized and being there, and not having people looking after them. And it really just lit a fire in me to like create some kind of like homestead community where literally my besties and I can live next door to each other and take care of each other into our old age. Because right now we're middle-aged. I hate it when I say that. Because nobody feels middle-aged.
Guess what? I don't think 90-year-olds feel middle-aged, but yeah, it's a harsh reality.
Yeah. So that's one of my big intentions for next year, is to move in that direction and
love it.
Figure out what small actions I can take to help make that a reality at some point in the future.
Yeah. I have my vision of my Golden Girls future someday. Love my partner. Hope he lives a long time. I figure I'll outlive him. He thinks I will too. And in that time, then I see myself like, rather than your vision of like living on all this land with people, like I see myself moving into some sort of like shared condo, I don't know what, with multiple master bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
Or primary bedrooms. Trying to work my language on that one. I keep forgetting. So ingrained on that. Where we can just like all live out our days but in an urban environment where we get to like go shopping and go out to eat and whatever. So we all isn't that fun to have our little Sunday dream.
Yeah.
But starting to think about building a toward it is beautiful. Well, community continues to be at the top of my list. So it's probably a good place for us to end, because the collective experience of doing life, business and life, is a big piece of my goals for next year too, just to continue to explore that further. And what does it look like? I just want to keep dreaming up new ways to not do business, particularly alone.
Yeah.
So we'll hold each other accountable on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, happy New Year, we hope. And 2025 will certainly be something. But I'm excited to do it with you and do this podcast into the new year and like explore everything that comes our way. At least we have each other to have a place to have these conversations, and for others who are like feeling some of the same stuff to listen. So thank you for those who are listening, and I hope your 2025 is wonderful.
Yeah. Happy New Year. It's actually my birthday in a couple of days. So
yay. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
We'll have to do like a birthday celebration episode or something. I'm a Pisces,
No,
so
no,
mine's coming. Well, mine's coming up in February. Well, we can for me.
We can for you.
My
I'm
birthday.
good.
You don't love your birthday?
I mean, I do, but I don't like the attention.
Oh,
Like, I want people to know it's my birthday, but then stop looking at me.
just throw the gifts at me. That's all I need. You don't have to look at me. Just give me the gift.
Yeah.
I like them to look at me and talk about how it is. But I also don't want a surprise birthday party or anything like that. Like, I don't like parties. I like virtual attention for my birthday. Send me all the texts, whatever. Send me the gifts.
Yeah.
Announce it on, like, to the world on social media. But then just, like, let me hide in the corner.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Well, happy birthday. Happy New Year. And we'll see you in 2025. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
I know people say that all the time. And if you're like me, often you just go on to the next podcast. But truly, taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.